Okay, so it looks like we have a bit of a follow-up. Well, a follow-up again, because but luckily this one's a bit more recent. So, in essence, I did a video about a month ago actually, where Grok had this massive controversy where you could essentially undress people online, and so what ended up happening is that so of course there's some grown women who got involved, but it actually led to some CSAM material. And so, unfortunately, that was a big controversy. But yeah, a lot of people spoke out against it at the time. And so, as of the moment, those changes were walked back. But we have a bit of a development in this story. And it actually turns out that um, there's been some raids happening at Grok as of right now, which is kind of crazy to think about because, you know, it's like actually raids at Grok, raids at X, and X offices. Because it turns out that the French government, or at least the UK, is not exactly not exactly fond of it. So we're actually going to look into that today, and we're actually going to do something a bit different. So unfortunately, I didn't prepare like an actual demo for you guys, but I'm going to demo something interesting, and with a little bit of my own knowledge, I will teach you guys exactly how things could get processed, like how AI processes these things, because I feel like nobody really understands it, so it's better that I do my best to explain some of it. Of course, I'm gonna preface this, I don't have the source code for Grok or how it works. I don't think I'm ever gonna see it, but we can make some educated guesses on how certain things work. But anyways, so let's get into the articles today because we have quite a bit to get through. And so, in essence, we have this. The French offices of Elon Musk's X have been raided by the Paris prosecutor's cybercrime unit as part of an investigation into suspected offenses, including unlawful data extraction and complicity in the possession of CSAM. The prosecutor's office also said both Musk and former X-chief executive Linda Yaccarino had been summoned to appear at hearings in April. In a separate development, the UK's Information Commissioner's Office, ICO, announced a probe into Musk's AI tool Grok over its potential to produce harmful sexualized image and video content. Writing on X, Musk said the raid was a political attack. X has previously characterized the French investigation as an attack on free speech. The investigation began in January 2025 when French prosecutors started looking into content recommended by X's algorithm, before being widened in July that year to include Musk's controversial AI chatbot Grok. In a post at the time, X said that the action was politically motivated and denied allegations it had manipulated its algorithm. Following today's raid, French prosecutors say they are now investigating whether X has broken the laws across multiple areas. Among potential crimes it said it would investigate were complicity in possession or organized distribution of images of child porn, nature infringement of people's image rights with sexual deepfakes, and fraudulent data extraction by an organized group. So, in other words, X is under investigation, it would seem. And in order to get a raid in Europe, I believe it's the same process as other places. You just have to get enough evidence, and then you're allowed to go. So it would appear that X, which is already under heavy fire as it is not exactly in the best of spots right now. And even if you go further down, he says here, meanwhile, UK authorities have given an update on their investigation into sexual deepfakes created by Grok and shared on X. The images, often using real images of women without their consent, prompted a barrage of criticism in January from victims, online safety campaigners, and politicians. The company eventually intervened to prevent the practice after Ofcom and others launched investigations. So we can see here that this is like the culmination of where we're at right now. So keep that in mind. But it added it was currently unable to investigate the creation of illegal images by Grok in this case because it did not have sufficient powers relating to chatbots. However, shortly afterwards, the ICO said it was launching its own probe in conjunction with Ofcom into the processing of personal data in relation to the Grok. The reports about Grok raise deeply troubling questions about how people's personal data has been used to generate intimate or sexualized images without their knowledge or consent, and whether the necessary safeguards are put in place to prevent this, said William Malcolm, the ICO's executive director for regulatory risk and innovation. In late January, the European Commission announced an investigation to its parent company XAI over concerns about the images. A commission spokesperson said it was in touch with France over its search of X's office in Paris. So that is the current update as it is right now. This is literally getting recorded like the day of. So stuff comes out, then it comes out later. But interesting enough, a certain individual that we've covered in the past actually had said something interesting. So if you don't remember Mr. Durov, he is actually the founder of Telegram. And Oh god, that's another video in itself. That was a while ago. But in essence, Telegram was under a lot of scrutiny because there's a lot of illegal activity going on Telegram at the time. And the biggest thing that I found at the time when I was covering is that specifically in Korea, there used to be these big group chats about like deep faking women and all that stuff. Real crazy rabbit hole, let me tell you. And that didn't go over well. So it actually got to the point where South Korea had to literally change laws very fast about deepfakes and all that because it was getting that egregious. So that is where we are at now. And so we'll read a little bit of the response from X because we don't really want to, I don't want to be reading to you guys all day. We have a demo to get to. We have some explanations to get to. So let's not be waiting. Essentially though, I think the part I really want to highlight is here. So although it says French authorities have launched a politically motivated criminal investigation, we don't really care if it's politically motivated. We want to see what actually happened. French authorities have requested access to X's recommendation algorithm and real-time data about all user posts on the platform in order for several experts to analyze the data and purportedly uncover the truth about the operation of the X platform. One of those experts is David Chevalarias, who spearheads the Escape X campaign, formerly known as Hello Quit X. The campaign is dedicated to encouraging X users to leave the platform. A second expert, Maziar Panahi, has previously participated in a research project with David Chalavari that demonstrates open hostility towards X. The involvement of these individuals raises serious concerns about the impartiality, fairness, and political motivations of the investigation. To put it charitably, a predetermined outcome is not a fair one. What's more, French authorities have classified X as an organized gang for the purpose of the investigation. This characterization, which is usually reserved for drug cartels or mafia groups, enables the French police to deploy extensive investigative powers under French law, including wiretapping the personal devices of X employees. X remains in the dark as to the specific allegations made against the platform. However, based on what we know so far, X believes that this investigation is distorting French law in order to serve a political agenda and ultimately restrict free speech. Now, the thing about free speech is always very interesting when it's brought up. This is an observation, is that usually free speech, to me anyway, is less about, it's more like free to do whatever you want without consequences, which, I mean, considering what is being investigated, I feel like that's not really, it has nothing to do with free speech. I feel like if you want to stop degenerate behavior, you should be, cooperating. But I mean, a certain list just came out, so what do I know about that? So anyways, that is basically where we are now in terms of that. So it's kind of interesting how, we are here and, X, of course, is actually going to deny these things, because why would you ever admit that you're even supporting that kind of stuff? So even today, I want to see if you could, even undress, a burger, for instance. So I actually found a post like this, where it's like, oh, can you undress a burger and turn it around? And apparently, it has actually been suspended for the time being. So remember, at the time this happened, there was a lot of backlash that was occurring whenever it happened. So unfortunately for me, my big old boobies cannot be exposed because guess what? You got to be premium to use that. And so I don't know how it goes for premium users. I didn't really take a look at it. I mean, if there's anyone, I'll probably put it up right now if I could find one. But yeah, you can't undress people as of this moment, because it was some pretty insane stuff, I have to say. Because yeah, pretty crazy. So interesting, if you might be asking a question that's probably on your mind. You might be asking yourself, Ashley, how the hell does this even work? How does it even know? How does Grok not know the difference between a picture of a woman and a picture of a child? Why does it even have why can it even do all of that? And so, as I said earlier at the beginning of the video, I don't have the source code for Grok. Okay, I would love to get my hands on those kind of things and see what's under the hood. But I just set up a bit of a little demo instead of using the actual stuff, because it turns out that of course the open source models as well, but I just needed something quick. I didn't have something prepared yet. So here I'm going to do something with Gemini. Okay, now Gemini at the moment I believe is one of the better ones at the moment, because it finally fixed some stuff it had issues with. So, and I also have some temporary premium, so why don't we use it? So I asked it to do a bit of a prompt. Okay, you're going to see on screen. I asked it to do a picture of a frog jumping off of a cliff with some clouds in the background. And so it's doing all of that. Okay, you're going to see it's doing all that. And so then I asked it something very specific. And I asked it to do, tell me exactly, for example, how you would code this or how you would interpret this. So you're going to see that in here. And it actually says here, so to get the specific look, I didn't just say cloud and frogs. a frog in clouds, I use a structured prompt that describes the lighting, the camera angle, and the texture. So here's where it gets really interesting. So for example here, I'm going to give you some pictures of different frogs, okay? So this is a frog, 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 and this is a what? I'm going to say this is a cloud, this is a cloud, this is a cliff, and this is a cliff. And so what the AI actually does is that not only does it say, it doesn't identify this is a frog, or this is a frog, or this is a frog, or this is a cloud, this is a cloud, or this is a cliff. What it's actually going to do is it's going to look at everything surrounding the frog itself. Mind you, this stuff is trained way in advance, so it knows. So it doesn't just look at, is this a frog, okay? It's going to look for like, what's a common characteristic of frogs? Some are green, frogs are usually brown, blah, 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 blah. And then so if it's looking for like a picture or a shot, it's going to look for a specific frame reference, okay? Even though it says here, for example, like photorealistic or 69, I didn't specify an art style, so it assumed automatically I wanted a frog that was, you know, doing its thing in the real world. And so after you see all this stuff, it's going to say, okay, these are the common traits I see across all these frogs. This is the common trait I see across all of these like clouds, and this is the common trait I see all of these cliffs. And so that is how it's going to go from, that's how it goes from frog, cliff, and all that. And also mind you that in the prompt itself, okay, and all the trained data, it literally looks at like everything common, like all the commonalities between it, okay? Also should keep in mind that this is my rough understanding. So there's some little nuances I'm forgetting, but this is more just a general overview. So if there's anyone who actually works in AI and wants to let me know some more stuff, let me know in the comments below. And so that's how the AI does it. However, something more interesting actually, it also gave me a human perspective as well, which is really, this is where we get into some nitty gritty. So we're going to get into some technical stuff, so don't be too scared. Okay, I promise it won't be that bad. Just bear with me. And so, for example, here's a Python script, because a lot of stuff is done in Python. It's very common. And so even in here, the Python script, it'll say here, if a human did, like a majestic frog diving to a sunset cloudscape with realistic textures. So that's something more the person would have to put in, or whatever program you do put it in. And that's where it draws all the common features from all of that stuff. So compared to an AI, just using all this trained data to get all the commonalities, what this one is doing here with a bit more human touch is that it's giving something very specific. So what looks majestic, what is diving into a sunset cloudscape, or is a frog like doing that, and how realistic can I get it? But it gets even crazier. So at the top, you're going to notice here something from this is from diffusers, and it's called Stable Diffusion Pipeline. So think of these like you know how your screwdrivers have different heads, okay? So in programming languages, you have libraries. Libraries are just different tools you can use to execute different stuff, because unfortunately, a lot of programming languages are very broad. And so unfortunately, you have to specify what tools you want to use within that language. For example, as well, in C++, you'll have one all the time where it's IO stream or input-output stream. And that's basically so you can actually put the commands out, because in C++, you have to be very specific at what commands you want, okay? But anyways, we're getting off topic here. And so we're actually going to go to this library, Stable Diffusion Pipeline, because there's something very interesting here. And so you'll see here that it's like, this is specifically the text to image latent diffusion model. So that's the one that actually people use in order to get stuff out there. But I just want to look at the source code just a little bit to understand where this is going. And so here, you'll see here that there's certain things that I want you to pay attention to. So here's something called the safety checker. That is probably the most important part. And so think of it like what's a good analogy for this one? I know. Think of it like I guess you're scanning your card, you're verifying your ID. Let's do that one, okay? Safety checker just says, okay, is this person allowed to come in the bar or not? You're above the age of 18, okay, you can come in. If you're below the age of 18, you can't get in. You can't come in. That's what it basically does. And so remember, when these AIs are trained, you have to literally tell it, this is a picture of a child, or this is a picture of an adult. And so my own speculation, okay, in that sometimes underneath piles and piles of code, intentional or not, sometimes these checkers are actually off. And so, for example, in the case of Grok, whatever version of this they have, the safety is off, which allows you to do that. So, for example, sometimes you have to tell these AIs, okay, this specific picture of a person is not allowed to be on the platform. Okay, no naked people, or this user is not like verified, and then so there you go. This stuff is not allowed. However, in the case of something like this, using the source code, because you have to put certain safeties on it, if you don't do that, that's how you lead to our disaster here. So in case you're not really understanding what happens here, essentially there's certain features that were on and certain features that were off that were not verified properly, which is how we got here in the first place. Because even back then, I believe Grok had something where I was believing it was like a mecha mustache man or something like that, which is kind of insane. Kind of insane when you think about it. Mecha mustache man or mecha Hitler. It's crazy. So yeah, that's kind of like where we are in terms of that. And so basically, that is how most of these AIs actually function. I mean, they're all, of course, coded very differently. This is not like the be-all, end-all way of coding. Sometimes there's certain stuff put in their place. Sometimes you have like helper functions and blah, blah. But that's a little too technical for this video. But the whole point that I'm trying to tell you is that in this case here, from my understanding, there's just certain things that were just sometimes either bypassed or intentionally let through in order for this to happen. Because Grok is always having some kind of issues like every single time. So instead of just being like all, doom and gloom or being like, okay, maybe, here we go again. I actually want to take a look under the hood and maybe provide some insight on how these work. Because naturally, I am studying this kind of stuff. So what can I do to help you guys out? Okay. But anyways, so in other words, yeah, so I don't know what this investigation is actually going to hold because there's a lot to look into. And especially when we look in the grand scheme of things, it's kind of like, well, that's one aspect of X that's wrong. There's a lot of other issues that this app already has, okay? But of course, stuff like CSAM is actually usually always on the platform, has to be taken off like constantly. Of course, naturally, report if you see it, obviously. But that's kind of the whole point of what we have here. So we'll see where this goes. Kind of insane. But, it's good that we took a look under the hood because now that you understand how this kind of stuff usually kind of works, or at least how it kind of can work, you can understand that, some stuff slips through the cracks. But say, for example, they find something where it's like, oh, this feature was actually off. You can say, Ashy told you so. You can say, I told you. You can say, I told you so. But anyways, that's basically it for this video. There's not much else to say. This is one of those cases where I probably, unless something really big happens, I probably won't do another follow-up on it because, it is what it is. So anyways, if you enjoyed this little demo that I did, I kind of want to do more of these in the future if it involves any programming. So, yeah, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and follow my social media below. But yeah, hopefully we have a lighter topic next time because lots of stuff that's just been like a little doom and gloom. We need some levity. Anyways, see you next video. Ciao.